Tov, today's is Nazir Daf Chavches, Nazir 28. In today's Daf Yomi, we're going to start in the middle of Chav Zayin Amud Beis. And the Gemara has taught the principle that Rabbi Yochanan says, Halacha Moshe Sinai, Rish Lakish says, based upon a verse, that if a person has money that they set aside for their karbanos of a nazir, if they have what's called ma'os sumim, if it's money that it was set aside for nazir, but the specific amount of money was not specified, and then the person dies, it's yipul and nadav. It goes for a nadav. It goes for voluntary offering. But if this was money, the Gemara then said, if it was money that was somehow specified, then we're going to say then it's considered ma'os mefureshes. And then it can't go for a nadava because it has the money of the chatos mixed in with it, the sin offering mixed in with it, and so therefore that money has the money of the sin offering. If the owner dies, it has to go to the Yam HaMelech. In that context, the Gemara says that if he donates an animal, then the animal is going to be considered like, if the animal has no blemish, it's like kedusha saguf. And it's actually the animal itself is part of the temple. And so therefore you have to wait for the animal to get a blemish, and only then can it be sacrificed. So, and then can be sold. And so therefore that's not going to be considered like Moses Sumim, because it's not easily translated into currency. It's a little bit more complicated. Wherefore it has, however, Rav Nachman said that if the animal had a blemish on it already, then it can just easily be sold. And so therefore it's like it was most assuming it's like currency. And so therefore it's like this money that was set aside, which will fall to an adafa. So in that context, in 27b, Gemara challenges this question. Rava challenges it from a brayso. Masiv Rava challenges it. It says in the pasuk, karbano, that a person brings his offering to the altar. If he finds out that he made a sin, levius karbano, he brings his offering. He brings his korban. The nasi who sins brings a male goat. So the Gemara says, "Bekarbanohu yotzeis," teaches us that the nasi can fulfill his obligation with his sin. A person who makes a sin can fulfill their obligation by bringing their own sin offering. Ve'eno yotzei, but he doesn't fulfill his obligation bekarban avah, with the sacrifice of his father. Meaning to say, you can only use his own sacrifice, not the sacrifice of his father. So then the brayso continues. You might think, I cannot use my father's sin offering if it was from a sin that was not the same level, but if it was the same type of sin, then I could use it. So the Gemara says, Tamomar karbano. Karbano, it says the word karbano twice. But karbano hu yotzei ve'enu yotzei bekarbano shalaviv. He can only use his own sacrifice and not the sacrifice of his father. Yachol lo yotzei bekarban aviv bebehema shehifresh afil min hakal hakal min hachamura hachamura. Sharei ein adam megalech behemas aviv benizirus. I might think, okay, you can't use an animal that his father had separated to bring a korban because I might think that that's the only prohibition, because by Nazirus, and if his father had died and left behind an animal, he can't use his father's animal as a korban. But if his father died and left behind money, even if it was for a more severe sin, he could use it for a minor sin or vice versa. Because a person can use his father's money if his father was a Nazir and he set aside money for his karbanos, and then he died, the person can become a Nazir and use that money. So maybe he can use his father's money for a sin offering. Bisman shem sumin wo bisman mefurashin, when it's assuming money and not mefurashin, money on the top of 28a. Talmud or karbano. It says no, the karbano hu yotzei ve'enu yotzei bekarban aviv. No, the verse says he needs his own money and not his father's money. So it teaches us, I might think, says the Gemara, so Gemara says, okay, fine, he can't use money that his father had separated or maybe he can use his own money that he had separated for one sin, he could bring it for a different offering. No, he can only bring the carbon from the money he had separated for that specific sin. I might think, okay, he can't use an animal that he had separated for himself from a minor sin to a more severe sin, or vice versa. For example, let's say he separated money because we know that if he has separated an animal to bring for a carbon, for a chelev, for having eaten non-kosher meat, and he ended up bringing it for blood that he ate, or vice versa. Then in that case, it's not considered me'ilah. The law of me'ilah doesn't apply. Below keeper, then in that case, we're going to say that it's not going to be considered like it is me'ilah, because he did not take the money out for chulin, but he wants to bring it from hektish to hektish, and also it doesn't serve as a kapara if he brought this animal, because it doesn't work in this case for a sin offering from one to one sin offering. But if he had separated money for himself from one sin to another sin, he could take it out. I might have thought that that's okay. Because we know that if he separated for himself money for chelav or adam, then in that case it is considered me'ilah. And then b'diavad we're going to say that atonement is good. So I might say lechatzila can also do it. No, it says for a sin they can only bring the carbon for the purpose of a sin. Anyway, all of this was the brisa, and the brisa brings this Rava brings this whole brisa only to ask him a question from the very beginning of the brisa. Katani mias behema, but it says in the brisa that an animal that another separated for his own sacrifices, his son can't bring that animal as a carbon. It says he can only bring his father's money as a carbon. He cannot bring his father's animal as a carbon. Katani mias behema. Doesn't that teach us? Doesn't it teach us from here that even if the animal has a blemish, that it's not going to be considered like it's money, and so therefore isn't this a question of Nachman that says that an animal with a blemish is considered like money? Gemara says no tamima. No, it's talking about an animal without a blemish. But what would be the law for the animal that's blemish? Gemara says that would be kastuma dami. That would be like money, and then it would be okay for the son to use it if he was in Nazir. It would be like that father left by Mos, assuming. So if that's the case, they ask the Gemara, to Katani Moshe for Shaman. Why does it say money that his father left behind? Listening Balas Mum, let it say the blemished animal that he left behind. So the Gemara says, Hachinami, that is the case, but what is it saying when it says an animal? Its value is for money, and that then it's only there for its value, and its value is money. And so that's actually what the Gemara is saying. So in the end, that question of Rava is pushed away. So now we come up to the next Mishnah. We know we've been learning the last 3 or 4 months that a husband has the right to reject the vows of his wife under a few conditions. One, he can only reject them on the day he hears it, and also he can only reject the vow if it's inoi nefesh, if it's an affliction of her soul, and if it's something beino beinav, if it's a vow between him and her. So let's say she takes a vow to be a Nazirite, and then she has to bring the karbanos of a Nazir. At the end of her vow, she has to bring in olah, chatos, and shlomim, and then the essential part of the sacrifice is not the slaughter of the animal, but the sprinkling of its blood on the altar. So let's say nizrek olah echad min hadamim. Let's say it says our Mishnah on the bottom of Chav Chesam Aleph. Let's say they sprinkled for this animal some of the blood. Nizrek olah echad min hadam. So they sprinkled the blood for one of the animals. We'll see which one. Eno yachol hafer. At that point, the husband is no longer able to reject the vow. And the reason why he can't reject the vow is because once he sprinkles the blood, at that point, she's going to be able to drink the wine. And so that's how Tosfos explains. To be yaim l'teres is no longer affliction of her soul because she could drink the wine. And if you say, well, what about the fact that she's going to have to shave off all the hair from her head as part of her Nazirus. And so the Gemara is going to answer, no, that's not going to be considered Inui Nefesh because she can always wear a wig, which was called Pei Nachris in the Gemara. But if she has not sprinkled the blood, she's still prohibited in wine. And so therefore, it's still considered Inui Nefesh, even though she's only going to be prohibited for a small amount of time. That's what Tosfos explains it. Whereas Rabbi Akiva says, Rabbi Akiva says, even if one of the animals was just slaughtered, but the blood was not sprinkled, then she's not going to be able to annul the vow. And the Gemara is going to explain because Rabbi Akiva says it'll be hefsed kachim. If he annuls the vow at that point, then it'll be a destruction of the kachim, and we don't want that. And the Gemara is going to explain, again, Tosfos points out that we're referring to where he slaughtered the chatas, because if you slaughter the chatas and then he annuls her vow, then that animal is going to not be able to be offered up on the altar, because she doesn't need the chatas, and you can't sprinkle the chatas' blood. You can't transfer it to another carbon. However, if it was a different animal, you could slaughter for a different carbon. So the Mishnah says, when do we say these halachos b'diglachas hatahara? When she's bringing the carbon nazirus at the end of her proper period of nazirus. But if she's bringing the carbonos in the middle of her nazirus, because she became ritually impure, she became tmeya, so then she has to bring these in order to become purified, and then she'll again go through the process of being a Nazirite, yafer. Then indeed he can reject her vows. Shu yachol, even if she slaughtered an animal. Shu yachol omar yavshi be'isha menuvelas. He could say, I don't want this woman who's a menuvelas, this disgusting woman who's going to be a Nazirite. I don't want such a circumstance. And so then he could say, I don't want an isha menuvelas, because she's not allowed to drink the wine, and that's not something to my taste. Whereas Rabbi Meir Omer Af betiglachas atahara yafer. Rabbi Meir says, even if she's sprinkled the blood and the only thing she's waiting for is to get her hair cut, he can still annul her vow. She yachol omar yevshi be'isha megalachas. He could say, I don't want my wife to shave her head, and so therefore I'm going to annul her vow. So, because at the end of your nazirus, you're required to cut off all the hair from your head. And Tanna Kamma is going to say, I don't have a problem with that because she could wear a wig. So the Gemara says, first of all, Masnisin Luk Rabbi Eliezer, our Mishnah is not like the position of Rabbi Eliezer, which we're going to see in full depth on Mem Zayin Amdalf. The Rabbi Eliezer Amar Te'aglachas Ma'akeves. According to Rabbi Eliezer, he's going to say, until you get the haircut, you can't drink the wine. So at this point, even after she sprinkles the blood, Rabbi Eliezer would allow the husband to reject the vow. But Kivan Dol Gilcha Asir B'chamra. So since she hasn't yet got the haircut, she can't drink the wine. But Kivan the Isla Nivel, and so since there's still something that's disgusting, it's a impediment to their relationship, Mati Mefer. The husband can still reject the vow after the sprinkling of the blood, not like the Tanna Kamma of our Mishnah, who says once the blood's sprinkled, she can drink wine, and therefore he cannot annul the vow. The Gemara says on the top of 28b, Tana Didan Savar, the Tana of our Mishnah is at the position, Kivin Diz Derek away, since Kivin Diz Derek Adam. The Tana of our Mishnah says that since the blood of one of the sacrifices was sprinkled for her, the Alta Sharia B'chamra, that right away she's permitted to have the wine. And so therefore there's no nivel, and she could drink the wine right away. Rabbi Akiva Savar, afilu ishtachitas behema, even if you slaughter the animal, he still can't reject the vow, mishum hefsei kachim, because you're causing the kachim to be destroyed. So Mask for Rabbi Zera Vamai. So he says, according to Rabbi Akiva, why are you causing the kachim to be destroyed? Okay, the animal was slaughtered, but you could sprinkle the blood for a different cause. Vamai lizrok daman shelo lishman. But sprinkle the blood for a different purpose, for a different animal. Don't sprinkle for what it was slaughtered for, but for a nazir, but sprinkle for something else, for a regular shlamim. So that's what Rabbi Zera is asking. Viatir basar bachil. If you sprinkle for a different shlamim, you could eat it. Milo Tanya, didn't we learn by the kivtzei atzeres, by the sheep of the shvuah sheshachtan shelo shman? Let's say you slaughter them not for the right intent, or you slaughter them too early or too late. Adam yizrok v'abasar yeyachal, that the blood you can sprinkle and you can eat the meat. B'maisa Shabbos, but if it's Shabbos, lo yizrach. If it's Shabbos, you can't sprinkle the blood. Why can't you sprinkle the blood if it's Shabbos? So the Mefarish says because since you can't eat the meat on Shabbos, so therefore you can't sprinkle it. And that's what he says. He says since you can't sprinkle it, you can't eat it. The Tosfos says here. Tosfos says, let's see where is it. Tosfos says it's like you're doing mitaken clay. It's like you're fixing it rabbinically, and so therefore you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos. That's how Tosfos explains it. So anyway, back to the Gemara. Hold on one second. So if it was Shabbos, you cannot sprinkle it. And Tosfos' explanation is because it's like you're being mitaken clay. V'im zarak, but if you did sprinkle it, since it's just rabbinically prohibited, hortza, then we're going to say that the sprinkling helps, and and then that night you could sprinkle, you could bring the limbs up on the ashes. And so we see from here that he also, if the husband has annulled his wife's vows, even if she slaughtered, even if the animal was slaughtered, it shouldn't be a problem because you could always bring it for the husband to reject the vow, because you could always bring it for something else. So the Gemara says, what would Rabbi Akiva say? Amri Ida Shachat Ol Shamim Hachinami. Rabbi Akiva would say, yeah, Ina Chinami. If she slaughtered the Ol Shamim, that you could just bring it as a regular general offering. But what we're referring to here is could go into Shachat Chatas Bereisha. Well, what was the carbon that was slaughtered? But the Chatas. So meaning to say that you just have to slaughter one of them in order to fulfill your obligation to start drinking the wine. So let's say So let's stop that second one first. So we're saying that what was slaughtered first? That was slaughtered first was the chatas, and once the chatas was slaughtered, then we're going to say that since the chatas was slaughtered, you can't transfer a chatas to anything else. The sin offering has to be directly connected to the source of a sin. It can't just be brought as a general offering. And this is in line with what we learned in that even if she slaughters the chatas first, then she could start drinking the wine. So therefore, we're going to say, therefore the husband cannot reject the vow after the sprinkling of the blood, because it's no longer inoi nefesh. And so that's so we're going to say that Rabbi Akiva is talking about a case where she slaughtered the chatos first, and also the Tana Kama is going to be speaking about a case where the blood of the chatos was sprinkled first. And so we see from here that even in a situation where the chatas was sprinkled first, the woman would be permitted to drink the wine immediately after the cutting of after the carbon, and it's not going to be inoi nefesh. And so therefore, according to Tana Kama, after the sprinkling of the blood, it can no longer be annulled. But according to Rabbi Akiva, even after the bringing of the chatas, before the sprinkling of the blood, it can't be annulled because you're causing the kachim to be destroyed. And then the Gemara says, "B'medvar mamur b'teglachas tahara." Our Mishnah said, what is this referring to when to the carbon tahara of the Nazir? To the good sacrifices. I mean to say at the end of her vow of being a Nazarite, not where she didn't become tamei. But if it was the carbonos where she became tamei, indeed he can reject it. Rameir says, "Afil b'teglachas tahara yafer." Even by tahara he can reject it. Because he could possibly say, I didn't want my wife to have to shave her head at the end of her marriage. So even the end of Rabbi Meir is saying, even after the blood was sprinkled, the husband can still reject the vow. But the Tana Kama says, no, why not? Tana Kama says, okay, she has to shave her head, but it's not inoi nefesh, it's not affliction. But she can wear a wig. The wig is totally fine. Rabbi Meir said, that no, the husband doesn't like her to wear the wig. I did the zuama, she's going to be schwitzing. He says it's not attractive. It's not going to look, it's not going to be appealing to him. And so therefore he could still annul the vow after, even though she could drink wine, it's still nefesh because he doesn't find the wig appealing. So I'm going to say from here it is a source that a woman could cover her head with a wig, and that's going to be considered proper head covering. Says the Mishnah, Ish Madir Espino Benazir. The Mishnah says that a man can make a vow and make his son into a Nazirite. Ve'ena Isha Maderes Es Binah. Whereas a woman cannot make a vow to make her son a Nazirite. So how does a man make a vow to make his son a Nazirite? Tosfos says that he says, Yehei B'ni Nazir. He says, let my son be a Nazir. And then he starts to count the days immediately. And even if the son does not know that his father made him a Nazirite, or alternatively, the father commands his son to say, Hareini Nazir. The father orders his son to say, I am a Nazirite. But a woman cannot make her son into a Nazir. Ketzad, how so? Let's say the son gets a haircut or the relatives get a haircut. He opposed to it. Or if his relatives raise an opposition. Well, under those circumstances, let's say the son has rejected the concept of being a Nazir, and the father had set aside animals. The chatas will die. The oa is an oa. The shlamim can be brought voluntarily. So here too, also the shlamim still is eaten with the stringencies of a Nazir's shlamim. It is eaten for one day, and it does not get. However, it does not get the bread. Assuming, let's say it has the money that was all lumped together, then yipu and a dava, then it goes to an adava. Maos mefarashim, if it was money that was set aside, mechatos, the money for the chatos goes to the yamamelch, yachol yamamelch, and then you cannot get benefit from it, but you're not considered misappropriating if you use it. May oa yaviu oa, the money for the oa bring us an oa moam bahen and it's meiwa. May shlamim yaviu shlamim v'nechal yom echad, for one day ve'ena tu nes lechem, and it does not require the bread which usually accompanies the shlamim of the Nazir. So the Gemara asks the question: Ish in avo ishavo. The father can make his son into a Nazirite, but the mother cannot. My time, Rabbi Yochanan says, Halacha ibn Nazir. Rabbi Yochanan says just a straight out Halacha Moshe Sinai. Yosef Bar Chanina says, name of Reish Lakish Kedei L'chanchol b'mitzvos. Now we want to educate him in the mitzvos, and so therefore the father can do it. So the Gemara says, well, why can't the mother do it if that's the case? Why can't the mother do it? Because says a father has to teach his son the mitzvos, but not the mother. So the Gemara is going to discuss this in length on Tafchav Tes, but we will pick this up. I just want to say the schedule that tonight's Daf Yomi will be at 3:30. Tomorrow's morning's Daf Yomi will be at 5:30 a.m. and at 8 a.m. Shkoyach, everybody have a good day.